Hi, my relatives. On today's podcast, I'm talking with my number one hero, my father, Piwapskweno, translating to Iron Man or Man Who Wears Metal. His colonial name is Ken Drury. His full name is Harry Kenneth Drury. Our family are Métis from Red River, Manitoba. Our family directly participated in the resistances the Métis were forced to conduct during the late 1800s. Our ancestry also includes Assiniboine and Anishinaabe. Ken has worked in Canada's correctional system for the last 18 years, 14 years as a program facilitator, helping men overcome their addictions through connection to their culture. My dad struggled with addiction for a portion of his life as well. We plan to talk about the correctional system, substance abuse, culture, trauma, and much more. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the man that broke the cycle so that I can live a privileged life, Piwapskweno Ken Drury.
Tansei, this Nakasian Piwapskweno. My name is Ken Drury. I'm from Manitoba, Cree Métis, and I want to say this is my story. Hi.
Hello, my relatives. How are you? Here at Our Storytellers, we care about your spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical well-being, which is why we want to inform you that this podcast discusses topics that may cause trauma to listeners and viewers. These subjects include mentions of Indian residential schools, assimilation, ongoing harm, colonial impacts, and much more. Our Storytellers recognizes the need to minimize the risks associated with traumatic subject matter. The Hope for Wellness helpline offers immediate help to all Indigenous people across Canada. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to offer immediate support and crisis intervention. Services are available in English and French, and in Nehiyaw, Anishinaabe and Inuktitut upon request. If you or someone you know are experiencing any harm, no matter how big or small it's perceived to be, you can call the toll-free helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or connect to the online chat at www.hopeforwellness.ca. Kinanaskaman, I'm grateful for you. Your ancestors are always with you. All my relations, Riel.
Awesome. All right.
Holy smokes. Okay, so the real reason why I had you on this podcast, I've been saving this for months. Am I actually your son, or did you find me somewhere?
We found you near the garbage. Hey, look what we found. Tax breaks.
Can we keep them? Oh, how you liking being back in BC for a little bit?
I don't like coming to BC. It's too busy, too many people, and rains. It just rains all winter. I don't miss the rain.
What's worse, the rain or the snow?
The rain.
How come?
Because you don't get to see the sun.
When it snows, you can see the sun.
Oh, yeah. Well, what you mean snows, it's like raining, but
Yeah.
frozen water.
I've been there.
But when it's not raining, it's sunny.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so
So where do you want to start?
I just instantly regretted having you on here, actually, out of nowhere.
So how do you start off? What's protocol?
What's protocol?
What's your protocol
Well-
when you're asking somebody to share a story?
Well, first and foremost, Dad, thank you for joining us on today's podcast and agreeing to be here. Just like every other guest that we have on the show, we always start off this podcast by first approaching it from a cultural and traditional lens. And part of that is offering protocol for you to sit here and share any stories or any lessons or anything that you want to share with us. So we do have a blanket for you behind here as well too, which is for the human. But we don't pass it on camera just because it makes a lot of noise.
It's crunchy.
Yeah, it's crunchy. But I do want to give you this tobacco as my offering for being on this podcast.
I know that's coming.
And I'm grateful for you for being here. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank
Introduce
you. I'm happy to be here. I'm really been excited to come and be a test case for you.
What's your initial thoughts of the entire setup? Was it more than you thought it was going to look like, or what?
My expectations it exceeded my expectations. Yes, it really has. Again, I mean, it's a work in progress, and nothing ever starts off, earning millions of dollars right away. These, people, you just have to keep building at it, learn from your mistakes, and keep getting up. We say akamemok, right? Just keep going, keep doing it,
Yeah.
right? Just keep going.
Yeah, well, and lucky for me, I have decent help. The director of listener experience, Jimbo, sitting behind us right now. I hope he's laughing. That's what we're hoping
Yeah,
for.
we're hoping he's laughing.
Yeah, hoping he's laughing.
If he's not, well, he can stay in the garage.
Introduce yourself.
Well, my GST name, my colonial name is Ken Drury. Actually, it's Harry Kenneth Drury. I was born in Winnipeg, June 21st, 1963. My traditional name is that was given to me at a Sundance is Piwapskweno, which literally translates to Iron Man, right? He who wears metal. That name, when it was given to me, changed my whole outlook, and we'll talk a little bit about ceremonies in a little bit. But for me, that was the pinnacle change in direction in my life when I started to see the world in a little bit of a different lens, because I had to own it. I had to learn that name. I had to feast that name. There's a lot of things that come with that name that you have a responsibility to care for, right? So, yeah, and so it's important to me that name, because I haven't met anyone else with that name, and all the young guys says, "Well, you got a cool name. I want one like that."
Would you mind sharing a little bit about what the name means to you?
Well, the name means to me because, during that time, that period of my life when I was going through Sundance and ceremonies, I was also going through cancer. And for me, I was diagnosed in 2009 with follicular lymphoma. So from that period of time was really very difficult period of my life. There was a lot of stress, a lot of relationship issues. I just was struggling with sobriety. I was sober, but I wasn't really healthy sober, right? And then I got diagnosed with cancer, and so I was going through all this treatment at the same time, and I was still going to Sundances and still going to ceremonies, and I had a dream, and in that dream, I was in a barn, and in that barn, there was horses, beautiful horses, and they're all ready, just like, come on, ride me, let's go. And there was other people mulling about in that barn, and they're putting their saddles on these horses, and they're getting on their horses and riding. But the horse that I was supposed to get on, he was excited. He was going to put on the saddle, but I couldn't find the saddle. I looked everywhere in that barn. I couldn't find the saddle. So I eventually had to, tell the horse, sorry, I can't ride you. I can't find a saddle. And I woke up, and I remember I woke up, I was sweating, and I didn't understand that dream. So that was months before the actual Sundance. And so I'm still going through chemotherapy and not feeling very well, eh? And because at that, I wasn't sure, the survival rate of cancer. I was given like 40% or something like that, right? So, so in my mind, I was trying to do everything to hang on to life, right? So I go to the ceremony, and one of the Sundance makers that were there, he was an elder from Manitoba, and I told him that story, and he says, "Ken, you know what horses mean to our people, right?" No, I don't know what it means. He says, when it's our time to go home, he said, it's that Mr. Atim that comes and gets us to take us home in that south direction. He says, it's not your time. It's not your time to go home. And I went, right?
Yeah.
And so I went, wow. And so in our Sundance, the way we have these little different ceremonies that are run all throughout that 4 days, right? And then one of those ceremonies is the horse dance. And so we bring that horse into the Sundance grounds, and we bring him to the tree, and the horse will choose who he wants to help. Well, on that particular day, I'm standing way in the back of that lodge, and everybody is mulling it, trying to get close to the horse. They all want to go get as close to the horse. And that horse just stopped, and he looking around, and then he looked at me. And Tom says, go see him. So I walk up to the horse, and he just watched me as I came through. Didn't move, didn't flinch. I put my arms around him. I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And as soon as I let go of him, then he flinched. And then he started to flinch because all the people were making him nervous. But at that moment, he didn't. He just let me hold him. And then when I let go, he took all that fear, all that sadness, all that sickness away from me. And I knew I was going to be okay. I knew it.
You never told me that they gave you 40% chance. I never thought.
I never told anyone that.
Really?
No.
Holy shit.
No.
And I never thought, when I remember growing up to that time, I never once thought, it never even crossed my mind. I thought you were just sick with a cold the whole time. You hit it very well. You were strong through the whole thing.
Yeah, I had to be strong too, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it was a difficult time, right?
So is that quality linked back to the name?
Yes. So that name, Piwapskweno, is a power name. It's a protective name. It's protection. And so part of my protection is I use that name to keep any negativity from hitting me, right? So there's a lot. I work in a very negative place, and I'm able to leave and be emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy in spite of all the stuff that I experience and witness on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it's a power name, and I evoke it when I don't know. I'll ask, "Hey, Piwapskweno," and I'll invoke that power when I need it. Right. So it's there as a protection when I need it.
Tell the people where you work.
Oh, I work in Corrections Canada. It's a great place. Federal Corrections. I've been doing it 18 years.
18 years.
18 years. Yeah.
What's your job title?
They call us correctional program facilitators. Well, my title is Indigenous Correctional Program Facilitator, and my job entails I facilitate programs to inmates, and it's a continuum-based program where when an inmate comes into the system, they get assessed for a level of security and in the level of programming. They could be anywhere from a minimum to a max, right? Or needing no interventions, or moderate or high interventions. So most of the guys that I work with fall between the moderate and high interventions. And I've been working at a max since 2020 now. So most of the guys I work with are high interventions. So I do basically just what we call primer programs, is to walk them through, help them, guide them to understand their own risk areas of their life, substance abuse being one of them, violence, who you hang out, where you hang out, right? Those intergenerational trauma, those experiences that we have, is to help them understand how did that impact their behaviors. And so look at the cognitive aspect of that crime cycle, and to be able to develop some strategies and some tools into making some changes and change the way they think about their lives, give them purpose, give them hope, right? And most of them, want to. It's just they don't know how to. And I can relate to that, because when I was a young man, I didn't know anything about how to change my life. I thought, this is it. This is how we're all going to be stuck here in this world.
What do you think leads our people to enter into correctional facilities as inmates?
Well, right now, it's multifaceted, and there's so many different factors that contribute to it. In today's society, I mean, the cost of living, like if most of us earn a decent living, and we're just making it by getting by, right? So think about if you have a a minimum wage, you're not going to be able to afford to live, rent a place, and then you add kids into that equation. Yeah. But I mean, I think most for these guys that I experience, they've been exposed to violence and substance abuse and trauma right from right from the get go, and all that trauma just builds up over time, and so they start to learn some unhealthy behaviors, and some of those unhealthy behaviors is learning that substance abuse helps numb the feelings, and so if you can numb the feelings, you can numb um, the problems that they have to face on a day-to-day basis. So, and it just creates this cycle of harm that just continues, and they get stuck in it. And then as soon as you add crime into that mix, and you add negative associates like gangs, it's just a bad mix, and they get lost in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it normalizes over time, and they don't think, wow, this is everybody does this. This is normal, but it's not normal, right? It wasn't our way. It's not our way. Our ancestors laid the path for us to a prescription of life through ceremonies, through our culture, through our languages, right? And we forgot that was taken away from us due to residential schools, which, my family has been impacted by that, as well as 60 Scoop, of course. My family, myself being a 60 Scoop survivor. And and that cycle just continues and rolls on, and it's even worse today. So we would think, well, get over it. Well, can't get over something if it's never stopped, right? It still continues. And so we need to figure out, how do we get back to those original instructions that we were given? Because a lot of us are so lost in this modern world. And the one-eyed dragon, is that little TV, right? That's the one-eyed dragon. That was prophesized. That one-eyed dragon will distract our young people away and lead them down a negative path. And so we have to come back to those original teachings. And so that's what, at least I try to bring to those young people that I work with, is that, there is a way. You just got to want it more than you go on the other way of life.
Yeah.
Right? And I know I've been there. I know how difficult it is, right? To wake up and, got to go through this again, right? It's depressing, oppressive. Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, I didn't know it was prophesized.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
It was prophesized years ago. They prophesized that there was going to be this one-eyed dragon that would be coming and corrupting our young ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what role does culture play in when you're teaching programs?
For me, it's the foundation of everything that I do. Because I mean, what the system, the governmental system does, the colonial system, what it wants us to do is it wants us to take these colonial practices, these standards of treatment, and throw an Indigenous cultural blanket on top of it. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? Because it's still colonial. So it takes real skill to be able to navigate that system and be able to infuse those teachings within that paradigm. It's very difficult, particularly if you have to write risk assessments on top of that. So how do you weave culture into a risk assessment, right? That somebody will be able to utilize to make some changes in their life. It's very hard. It's not easy.
Right.
It's a real skill.
How do you balance that?
How do I balance that? Well, I balance that is how do I balance? I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's some people I just have a knack for doing it.
Where do you feel more comfortable? Do you feel like, not maybe comfortable, it's not the right word, but where do you feel more like yourself when you're writing those risk assessments, or when you're delivering the programs?
I'm delivering.
Really?
That's my forte. Being in the classroom with these guys, that's my forte, is being able to just have fun with them, right? I'm just another guy in a room, right? Who has a little bit more experience than you,
Mhm.
right? Because I come from the same place most of these guys come from. Because I was as mentioned to you, right? I was born and raised in Winnipeg, right? And so growing up in Winnipeg, in I was born in 1963, so I grew up in Winnipeg. Grew up in the north end of Winnipeg. We moved. I think it was like 68, 69 when we moved in. How was I? Yeah, 68, 69. And we moved into development north, what they call Lord Selkirk Developments, right? It was brand new. Didn't even have sidewalks in yet, right? The buildings were up. We were moving in. Still, they were, and so that was those developments were designed as low income housing for all those people that were pretty much road allowance, right? And couldn't afford to live anywhere else. So we lived there for quite a while. And again, when you're living in low income housing, you're not everybody is going to be there that'll be healthy, right?
Mhm.
There's going to be lots of issues, and of course I mean, I grew up with substance abuse all around me. My parents, they drank a lot. There was a lot of violence in the home, a lot of abuse of all kinds. Myself and my siblings were scooped. Um, and not really sure the story, but I have some understanding that um, my mother was placed in a situation that was beyond her control, and the system just um, Native women. It wasn't good for Native women. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
And so anyway, so they scooped us all, and I was in foster care. That my older siblings went into foster care, and they were there. They aged out in foster care, but for whatever reason, I was in there for a little while, and I know that white family was trying to adopt me, but I don't know why. I'm just speculating, and it's just things that I put together. But I think my grandmother, who was a landowner, um, had different status in society, right? Even though she was a native woman or Métis, she had better status because she was a landowner. Not many Métis people owned land, right?
Mhm.
Because she had married a white man, and so they all identified as French, right? And so my dad identified as Irish because his father was an Irishman from United States. So they didn't identify as Métis or Native, right? They identified as white.
Yeah.
So they were able to get me. I think that's one of the reasons why they were because my dad was a war veteran too, right?
Mhm.
And so that status on top gave them a bit more authority to pull me out of the system, right? Said no, they might have to argue. No, that's not a native kid. That's a white kid. Bring him out, right? And
Yeah.
I could have passed for white because I had blonde hair.
Yeah.
Right? Look at me now. Look like an Indian now. What happened?
Tell me about your memories with your dad.
Honestly, I was talking to my sister. I just found my sister. My sister found us, right? My dad's firstborn, Donna, and we were sharing about our memories, and she doesn't have any memories of Harry, but I have some. Not a lot, again, because he died when I just turned 8 years old when he died. And all the little memories I have is basically where he's sitting on a couch watching hockey and I'm sitting with him. That's it. That's all.
Mm.
Right. And in the hospital prior to he died. That's all. That's the only memories I have of him. Everything else um, is on the farm with my grandmother, his mom, on the farm, and that's where most of my solid memories are. Right, not in the city, but on the country, on the farm, on the homestead that my white Drury grandfather homesteaded back in 1913, and which is an interesting story. I'll have to tell you that story, but so I grew up there, and that's where I felt the most at peace. I'm on the land. I'm hunting. gathering. My family taught me how to dig Seneca root and walk into the mile and a half into town and sell it, right? And as a little kid, right, I'd walk a mile and a half down the highway with my sack of Seneca roots, selling it so I can go buy a pop, chips, and chocolate bar, right? That was heaven for me, man. And I walked to town. I was like 9, right? Yeah, nobody's like, oh, you can't let that kid walk by himself. No, yeah, we just walk.
That kid's selling Seneca root.
Everyone knows you, right?
Yeah,
Everybody knows you in the country, right? So nobody. That's Harry's boy. Hey, little boy walking down the road, right? We didn't have to worry about nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So back then everybody knew you, and it just turned out that everyone knew us because my grandmother had sisters who married homesteaders all in the area. So I didn't even know I had all these relatives that were all around me. Right? I thought they were just farmers and strangers, but they were all my relatives, and I didn't know. Right? But I remember Mom said, hey, when I was a teenager, she said, Ned, don't you sleep with anyone out there. Oh, why? Oops, too late.
So you moved into the North End. Your best memories are out on the farm,
on the Drury farm. Yeah, on the Drury farm. Yeah, those are my best. So, and growing up in the city, I mean, there's lots of violence. I was bullied a lot as a kid, right? I always thought I had slanted eyes, right? So, and kids used to make fun of me, slant eyes, and that really hurt my feelings, right? And then they would bully me, right? And so they beat me up, and I would run home, and I used to have to just wait, and I was afraid.
Did I ever tell you what I was bullied for as a kid?
No.
You know what they called me?
Slant eyes?
Sag eye.
Sag eye.
Yeah, it sagged my eyes. Yeah. Little did they know they call them bedroom eyes up in the adult world.
Yeah, apparently it's bedroom eyes.
Oh, it's so funny. Anyway, keep going.
I was bullied. Yeah, I was bullied. So growing up in Winnipeg wasn't easy. There was gangs around, but it was normal, right? There's a lot of strange people around back then, right? So yeah, a lot of violence, a lot of substance abuse, there was a lot of things that we would go, oh, no, I'm not letting my kids do that. Yeah. Right? Where we pretty much parented ourselves, right? Because, most of the time we didn't want to be in the home because our parents were either hungover or they were fighting or they didn't like to have kids around. Mm. So we kind of grew up in the community, right? So, and as long as we came home for supper, that's all that mattered. And that's a lot of us were like that, right? Yeah. So I spent a lot of time, wandering around friends' houses and just, yeah.
Tell me about Grandma Drury.
Grandma Drury. So Grandma Drury, her real name is Marie Larocque. But she was born in St. Eustache, Manitoba. And she comes from the Larocque family. Her father was Oliver, and then Oliver begets Peter, and blah, 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 right? So they're all from that White Horse Plains, St. Eustache area of Manitoba, which is close to Portage la Prairie, right? So there was big Métis settlements around there. And so they were part of that Cuthbert Grant area, right? And so when Cuthbert, during the buffalo hunts, when there was major buffalo hunts, one from Red River, Fort Garry, one from White Horse Plains, and one from Pembina, right? And so they would all kind of travel and meet up someplace in Montana on the plains and to do the hunting. But so our family grew up in that I guess the Cuthbert Grant Métis area. And so our Larocque family has been in that area, I think, around since treaties, because I know that we have a familial connection to the Larocques and Piches who took treaty with Chief Bobtail and Chief Ermiskin. So we're connected. I just haven't been able to make that link there, but I know that they were all together in Cypress Hills prior or around the time of treaty making, and they actually wanted a treaty down in Cyprus, but the Canadian government didn't want them to be there, so too close to the United States, and so they moved them all away. So I think that's where a lot of our communities at that time split and went in different areas, right? So Grandma Drury, so she was born in about 1894, right? And so she, there's not much. I got some pictures of her when she was a young woman, but I know there was at one point, and this is around 1913, when John Drury was immigrating to Canada through the homestead laws that were at that time. I forget what they were called, but he was homesteading. So John Drury was living in Idaho or Iowa, Des Moines area. So he was married, had a child, and he was with his father-in-law, stepfather, and he had a half brother. So the half brother comes over first. Now all this information is loosely tied together through war records and personal correspondence between the war records and him, as well as some of my own stories that my family have shared. And so I kind of went, oh, here's the tale. Here's the real truth, right? And so she's obviously living in St. Eustache area. She has a little kid prior to him, right, coming to Canada to help go start scoping out land. And they end up going to Hodson, Manitoba, this is actually around the time when they moved Chief Peguis to where they are currently. They moved them from Selkirk area to where they currently are now, near Hodson, Manitoba. And so she had a child prior to meeting this, what I would call the young Rosenbeck. So that his half brother, his stepfather, is a Rosenbeck, which really is Rosenberg, but got mistranslated. And so then there's so Rosenbeck has a son, young Rosenbeck. See, I don't know the names of these men. I think the old man is still buried in the reserve, and I guess I could go look at the headstone and get the name. But the young one died overseas during World War I, so I don't know the name. Young Rosenbeck comes to Canada. I don't know how he meets my grandmother, but they end up going to Hodson. The child that my grandmother had at that time, she leaves in Saint Laurent with family of the boy, because it ended up that boy is Joe Larocque. So Uncle Joe is I didn't know he was my uncle, but I used to see that old man coming. He was an old man when I was a young boy, right? So I used to see that old man coming to visit grandma, right? I didn't know who he was, right? I just think, oh, I like his cowboy hat, right? He was pretty cool looking old man, right? But I didn't know that was her boy, because he lived in Saint Eustache, and so not Saint Eustache, he lived in Saint Laurent, and so she left him with family there, and obviously she must have followed young Rosenbeck to Hodson because he was looking for a place to homestead for John Drury and his wife and kid and stepfather, because they're going to follow later. So somewhere along that line, they end up coming to get the land where our family grew up, start developing, clearing it off, obviously, right? So Granny Drury has another kid around 1916, somewhere in that ballpark, and war breaks out. Both young Rosenbeck and John Drury enlist to go and fight, right? And so John Drury is not a young man at this point, because he was born in 1884, and now it's 1916, so he's like 33, 34 years old, right? So he's not a young man per se, but they both go off and join the war. Granny has a little girl, right? I grew up believing in that little girl, Sarah Drury, Sarah Jackson, who she married, was John Drury's daughter, but she's not. She is the daughter of this young Rosenbeck, who was lost to history because he was killed overseas. And so around that time of correspondence between my grandfather, John Drury, and the war records, or I forget the War Department, he says, well, your half-brother, your brother dies, was killed in action. And around that same time, my grandfather's wife and child also die in a fire. And so he has to go home to take care of business, right? And around that time, he goes to Hodson, right? And so my grandmother is living in Hodson. So I don't know what transpires, but I know that at some point after the war, my grandfather marries my grandmother, which I think he did out of honor for his deceased brother, and the fact that Mary Drury or Mary LaRock had a baby with his brother, and so he didn't want, because she was a Native woman, right? She's a Métis, but as far as she was Native, and being a single mother, not married, adding being Native on top of that, wasn't a good mix. And so I think to protect her and that child, married her. And so that picture that I have of my grandmother's wedding is more of a picture that she's grieving.
We'll put it up.
yeah, she's grieving. And so that was her wedding day. She's dressed in black, right? Looks like a kind of Mona Lisa, though. So Granny Drury is, and they spoke Michif. My granny didn't understand a word of English. So I'm going, what kind of that must have been a cool relationship. John Drury didn't speak a word of in native language.
Yeah,
right. He was an Englishman from the United States, right?
Yeah.
So the story goes. But my granny didn't speak no English.
Yeah.
She spoke French, but she also spoke Michif and probably some Soto too, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
But they wouldn't have talked that language, right? French would have been the language that would have been spoken in the home.
Yeah.
Right. But which is interesting because my dad, Harry, and Gordon, all the kids never spoke French. I went, how could not French rub off on them? Right?
Yeah.
Growing up on the farm, right? Isolated farm, and not understanding French.
Well, their dad probably taught them English only.
Yeah. I guess she didn't talk.
Yeah. Wow.
Because obviously but when I remember aunts and people would come over, she would just be talking French to them.
Yeah.
Especially if my mom came around too.
Yeah.
Right? My mom and all my mom's side, they're all Métis too, right?
Yeah.
So they all speak Michif and French.
Yeah.
Right? So when they got together, they spoke it. I remember them speaking Michif, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But because how the Prue family and my Drury family are connected, because originally my dad's older brother John Drury, he married my mom's oldest sister Rita, and so that's how we were connected to that family in the beginning, and so that's kind of how our families have been stuck together.
Yeah,
from that, because my granny didn't like my mom's side of the family, right? She didn't like it. She thought those girls weren't good enough for her boys, but they kept coming back for more.
Interesting. So that's how. So then we know the next step of the story. So then your dad comes back from war. He gets back into Vancouver.
Yeah, he comes to he
actually fathers a child there. We just figured that out.
Yeah. He's recovering from the war in Vancouver.
He went to Hong Kong.
Yeah, he was a POW in Hong Kong, and so when he gets out of when they're liberated, he comes back to Vancouver and spends a long time in hospital recovering, right? And so I guess as he got healthier, he just started to work in Vancouver, and I would imagine because they didn't really have very good mental health programs back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Right? You suck it up, and if you couldn't suck it up, then you drank. And he was a pretty pretty bad alcoholic. As people will share, is that he was a bad drunk, and so obviously he drank a lot, and but he would come back and forth from Vancouver to Manitoba all the time because Mom would say that, oh yeah, he used to come back all the time, and then he would go back to Vancouver, come back, and that sort of thing, right? And so I think so Donna, we've always had we had a picture of Donna, and Mom said, oh, that's your son's or your dad's daughter, but we don't know her name and we don't know nothing about her, right? Just says Harry's daughter on the back of this picture, right? So she basically was lost to us in history, right? And so we always prayed that, oh, someday maybe she'll find us or we'll find her, right? But learning now is she never knew nothing about us. She didn't know Harry had other family, right? Because the stories that she learned was that Harry wasn't a nice guy, right? He was a violent guy and he was a bad drunk. And so Donna's mom wanted nothing to do with him or even want to talk about him. So whatever information that she shared with Donna was little bits and pieces here and there, right? So she didn't really know much about him other than he was in the war, right?
Auntie Donna did tell me one story where she was in a bar and her mom made her talk to a guy that was also in the war with Grandpa.
Yeah, that knew him, yeah.
And she describes the guy as looking like he was tarred, like he was
burnt.
crisp and burnt from the nuclear bomb that was dropped.
Yeah.
And she said that she told him that he never knew your dad, but whatever he was like, he wasn't always like that.
Right.
That's what she told him.
Yeah.
And then that's one of the only things she's ever heard about him.
Yeah.
She's like, well, that was weird. You just continue to live life.
Yeah.
And for context for the listener and everything like that, we a few months back,
August, actually.
August, my Auntie Annie, who's my dad's younger sister, she posted a picture of my grandpa, my dad's dad, on her Facebook profile picture through a lot of like 23andMe or Ancestry.com or something like that. Donna eventually got a hold of a war picture from him, and she found the common name Anne that ran through the Anne Drury, kept running through the family, and then she looked it up on Facebook and saw that picture, commented on one of my Auntie Annie's Facebook posts, which there's a few, and then she got in touch with the family. And then I was the first one to go over there and see her, and we just had our very first, this is so fitting, we just had our very first family dinner with Auntie Donna all together on Remembrance Day in honor of your dad.
Yeah.
Tell me the creator doesn't work.
Yeah.
Hey?
It moves in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
It is quite fitting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is quite fitting, yeah.
So then, I'll go for it.
No, I was just thinking because we brought her back into the fold. We brought her back into the family.
Yeah.
We blanketed her and said, now, Donna said, well, we should get a blood test just to make sure. No. I know you're a family.
It's weird. It's weird how well she fits in right away.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
We're making fun of each other for the same shit we make fun of each other like in Manitoba.
Yeah.
So weird. Anyway, so that's I'm very, very proud of that story. I'm very happy that happened. And then let's jump back into your life though. Let's get right back into it. So Granny Drury spoke with Chief to you. You were growing up on the farm, kind of going back and forth as a kid between Winnipeg and farm.
Like I said, my memories of being on a farm was the most important for me. I just look forward to summers, just to get out of the city, and my mom was happy to get rid of us too. Right? Mary and Ann hated going, but I loved it because I got to play with the dogs again and got to run in the bush and go harvest and pick berries and just be a kid in the country, right? And go hang out with cousins and shoot guns and right. That was like a dream come true. And I really wanted to live there, but Mom would never let me live there. She thought if I lived there, I'd become native or something. As she described it back then. I went, "There's nothing wrong with that, Mom. I want to be native." She didn't use that word though.
What a little bit more derogatory?
Yeah, you're gonna be Indian if you go there and live with your cousins. They're what? What do you mean Indian? I didn't know I was an Indian or even Métis for that matter growing up. Right? I had such identity confusion because we got to remember, like in Winnipeg, being Métis people in Winnipeg, people used to come up to me, and this is after I'll come back to my original. People would come up to me and say, "Hey, you're native, eh?" I said, "Yeah, okay." So where you from? And this is in Winnipeg, right? So here. No. You're native though. So you come from someplace here. They didn't realize that the city grew up around us. We never went anywhere. We just had to hide better as the city grew up around us, right?
Yeah.
And so, for my mom's family, the Prue family, because Prue Lamarans, right? And if you follow that line, it goes right back to Lajimotis and blah blah blah. You mentioned that on another podcast. So, but we hid that, and some of our family members could pass for white, and if they could pass for white, that's what they were French, right, or white or whatever. I don't know how they identified, but generally when we were native looking, like Mom and all our that side of our family were all native looking, right? And so we couldn't escape that discrimination and racism by non-Indigenous people, right? We were always called half-breeds. I mean, growing up as a little kid in the community, "Hey, you dirty little half-breed," they would yell at me, "Get out of here," right? And I go, "Oh, Mom, why do you call me half-breed?" Right? What does that mean? Never mind. Right?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. So, so I had a lot of confusion. If they were partying, they said, "No, you're German." German? What a weird thing to say. But you know what? It makes sense to me why she would say that, because John Drury's stepfather was German, right? But he was Jewish German, right? They had immigrated from Germany or Austria or something like that. I have it written someplace, but they immigrated in the 1840s, 1850s or something like that to the United States. And so, yeah, they're German. But we're not. Like, I guess in a sense we have German Jewish ancestry from John Drury. Like, so my grandfather, John Drury, his father was John Drury, right? And so his wife, let me get this right. His wife is Emma Price, which was originally Prus, and they are from. And I found the records that traced them back to Austria. So they were Jewish, German, Austrian immigrants at some point.
Hi, my relatives. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. Just so you know, you can get all these podcasts the second that we record them through our Patreon page for a minor donation of $20. Anything helps out the podcast. It really helps us grow, be able to reinvest in equipment, be able to hopefully pay these people for attending the podcast as well too, and being so gracious and sharing their stories. That's amazing. The other thing that you can do, if you can't donate monetarily, is you can comment some feedback, shoot us a message or a DM on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or anything like that. Let us know how we're doing and how we can improve this podcast. Also, let us know who you want on the podcast too, because we're willing to reach out to anybody. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah,
that's
but my
interesting.
identity, so it was really confusing. I'm French, I'm German, but never native.
Do you remember? You told me one time that you used to remember like on a few drunken nights when all the crews would get together, that they would sit around and tell some old
They used to,
Métis
they used
stories
to, yeah, they used
when
to
it
sit
was
around,
safe for them to
and
do
they were
so.
speaking in Michif, right? They would
Yeah.
speak in French, as they were saying, but it was Michif,
Yeah.
and they would be, and I remember I could understand it then.
Yeah.
I can't now, but back then I could, and they would talk stories about, and Louis Riel and things that were going on during that time, and how things might have been if this would have happened, and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I remember they were playing. My family liked to play cards, right?
Yeah.
So they were always playing cards and drinking and talking. And I remember my grandfather had a spittoon right there, and I was a little kid sitting on playing on the kitchen floor, and into the spittoon, right? I just a vivid memory, right? It was just a vivid memory, and I remember they would like all the uncles and aunts. They would all be sitting around just playing cards and talking about those days. But in public, never.
Never.
We're French.
Ah.
That's it. Yeah.
That must have been such a curse back in the Métis days, eh? Like,
well, it was difficult. I mean, yeah. Again, there was a movement going on, right? The whole civil rights and all that, and so there are a lot of Métis movement going on too. Now they're fighting for our rights, and First Nations were fighting for their rights, and I think we were finally legal human beings under law, right? And so there was a lot of movers and shakers in that time, outside of the scope of my reality, right? But it was happening. But in my world, it was just survival, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to survive and But I didn't realize, growing up in the north end of Winnipeg, is that all those people I used to hang with, and I used to admire some of those older guys that I grew up around with, like Dave Chardon, who eventually became the president of the Métis Manitoba Métis Federation. Like I used to look up to him, and I have a lot of good memories of a lot of those people that were, and I had no idea they were movers and shakers in that world, right? Because I was so obsessed and selfish about just having good times and chasing girls and partying, right? That was my whole life. I didn't think of this is all this life dealt me. So I didn't aspire to be anything more than just, make enough money to buy my next drink, right? And party.
Jump into your teenage years, Dad.
Well, I mean, yeah. So again, as I mentioned, so I grew up, when I was growing up, I was bullied a lot, and so there was a group of us. We were, junior high, so we all got into martial arts, and so I started. I think I was like 13 when I got into karate for the first time, and I remember the Girls and Boys Club would host these, would put on these little activities for the community. So I went and joined, and so I started learning karate, and I loved it. Right, I just loved karate, and so I started to learn some moves, and I started to get pretty good. And I remember around the same time, then the Friendship Center, the Indian and Métis Friendship Center, opened up, and they started. There was a couple of community leaders. Jim LaValle was one of them, and a few others. They started organizing some classes in the Friendship Center, so taekwondo, boxing, kickboxing later. But so I went, yeah, it was free, right, for us urban kids, right, urban area kids, right, it was free for us. So I went, and I loved it. I knew I wasn't going to be a hockey player because we're poor. Our family is poor. My mom worked a really tedious job, and so we didn't have money. And right, so if we could do things for free, it was great, right? And so it was. Yeah, I took advantage of that, and I just enmeshed myself. That's all I wanted. I lived, breathed it. Martial arts, boxing, got into competition, fought, and and I did that for most of my teenage and early 20s, right? I lived and breathed martial arts, kickboxing. I was going to turn pro, but again, my lifestyle was got in the way. But I was thinking, good, man. That's a poster right there. That was the club that Jim LaValle eventually opened, and he got funding to open up this club for urban um, urban kids in the north end of Winnipeg. And so by then, I'm 16 years old when he opened up his club. And I was at that point where I was good enough to be an assistant instructor. So I was teaching young kids, right? Taekwondo and kicking, punching, and the discipline of Taekwondo, right? And boxing, and eventually it was kickboxing. We went into kickboxing, and that's when I started fighting amateur kickboxing, and I loved it.
What did it do for you? Did it just grow your confidence?
It gave me confidence, but it also gave me purpose, and it gave me my self-esteem, because people, we would go to tournaments, especially in Winnipeg. There's a thing called Folklorama, and we used to go do tournaments in these Folklorama, right? The Indian and Friendship Métis Center would put on these. We would come and do demonstrations, and we were like rock stars, right?
Yeah.
So it really fed my ego, and I really loved it. Right.
What's more tea, Louis?
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah. So So I just pursued it with everything, and again, like I'm in junior high, and all those ones that used to bully me, stopped.
Oh, perfect delivery of that one. Oops.
Yeah, they stopped. And that's because, again, there was a group of us, and we're like a little gang, but nobody wanted to mess with us, right?
Yeah.
You mess with one, you messed with all of us,
Yeah.
right? And we were all martial artists, all of us.
Yeah.
So
She had a team too.
yeah. So don't mess with those guys, right?
Yeah.
But we weren't bullies. We never walked around bullying, but we were just there. We were just having a good time, living young. Well, just having fun with life.
So
right?
interesting. When you learn to fight, you stop fighting.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I always thought that was so weird.
Yeah.
But I really, really hope Jim's passed on now, right?
Jim, yeah, I believe he's passed on. Jim LaValle passed on.
I hope we can finally get this to one of his family members.
Well, I'm sure they will. They'll be on Facebook. I'm sure they're all looking.
I hope we can send it to them so that way that they can know that Jim had such an influence. Like, there's probably more stories like
Jim.
you.
Jim knew because I saw him years later as grown men.
Yeah.
And I let him know. I says, I want to thank you for everything you did for me. And I had an opportunity to let him know how I felt about that. And again, he was still, I don't know what he was up to then. I can't remember, but he acknowledged it. And so that's all I wanted. That was enough for me.
Yeah.
Right. That was enough for me to that he did. I mean, everyone, this is one of the things that are important, I think, if somebody's listening to this and they're struggling with addictions, or they're struggling with problems in their life, is that, if we don't have a purpose or something that makes us feel, good about ourselves, or that we can aspire to be something better than ourselves, right? We have to have that, right? So many of our communities, Indigenous communities I'm speaking about, don't have anything to aspire to, that purpose, right? Because we're so oppressed with the intergenerational trauma of and it's just like, especially if you come from a reserve, there's no work, there's such a big world out there. Don't put all your eggs in that one little basket, right? Go off and experience the world. And, you can always come home, but you'll never get another chance to go and experience the world and take in all that valuable knowledge and teachings that you're going to get from interacting with the world, right? You don't have to stay there. Just go out and take that risk, right? So many of our people are afraid to take a risk because we've been told that we're less than, right? And so that's just bred into our DNA kind of now, right? So they go, why should we bother, right? But you have to become uncomfortable to get those things that you really want, right? And sometimes we want to stay comfortable, right? It's always, I remember this elder used to always tell me this. He says, it's like you're up to your neck in this vat of shit, right? And he says, and all you can think of is, it's warm in here. Right? You don't know if there's anything better, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just comfortable, and you have to push yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You have to push yourself. And that's why I respect what you're doing here today, is that, you get an idea and you just pursue it. Like, I wish more of our young people were doing it. And there are a lot of young people doing it. I wish more would, because we'd be deadly. If more of our young people did that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But we need to have purpose, right? And we need to have some kind of goal.
Yeah.
Right? And partying and drinking, that's a waste.
Totally.
It's a waste.
Totally.
I wasted half of my life pursuing that, and I got nothing for it, right? But a lot of heartache. And so, you know what? I always come back to culture. Our ancestors gave us a prescription of life, how to live our life. And it's in those ceremonies, right? The natural laws are all built into us. And we could be walking down the street, and all those teachings are around us already if you pay attention to them, right? These words that we learn in our languages, so it's important to learn our language, right? And as a 60s scoop who's trying to learn the language, these words like wakotuin, right? Which is all about those kinships, making relations. But it's so much more than just relationships. It's about that interaction with all of life, right? Striving to create balance, right? And that dance in that relationship is, we're just one little small speck in that wheel of life, Piwapskweno, right? We're specking that, while everything else is in this dance of perfection. And here this little speck, trying to change that, right? And because we mess things up, because we put something out of balance. And so, life is trying to put it back into balance. And then we have to learn how to go. This ego it gets us into trouble. And so we have to get out of here and connect that heart again. That's that sweetgrass road, right? And that's the path that we have to. This medicine, they made a contract for us, right? That contract is that, well, I'll help you, but you have to create that balance back, right? When we talk about this tobacco, this is one of the medicines that were given to us to create that balance. They said, Creator and this tobacco made that agreement and said, I will offer myself up so that those pitiful ones will be able to create that balance in the world these ones said, I will make that contract too, so that they will help them create balance and purify their spirit, right? All those medicines did that. All those animal spirits did that, right? And here we come along, we forget that contract. So we need ceremonies to remind us of those contracts, to remind us that we are just a little speck in that cycle of life. And that's why when you become an Indigenous thinker, you understand the intimacy, the responsibility of living in that balance and not upsetting that balance, but living with it, within it, right? And that's the piece. When you come full circle back to these traditional teachings, right? Is that's going to go, I get it now. I don't have to struggle, do I? Right? I don't have to fight no more. Right? There's a lot of good singers, a lot of good people out there that are doing it, but they're still stuck in that 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Yeah.
Right? They want to live a traditional life, but I also want to have a good time and party, and those two don't come together.
They're not a mix.
They're not a good mix.
And like our way of life, I mean, I don't know. I feel so privileged to say this, but because of how you raised me, like I didn't really know anything other than that. So it's like, for me, like I see the colonial world as just sick. And I always seen it kind of like that because they don't have that full circle. Everything is about that ego.
It
It's so
is.
poisonous.
Yeah.
It hurts. It
But
hurts people.
it does, and we have to remind ourselves that we always have to remind ourselves
Yeah.
of how to, and that's why we have medicines to help us remind us, right? Stay mindful, to stay in the moment,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, y- you're privileged, but I've had other boys that are older, your older brothers, that weren't so privileged, right? And they, you know, they they experienced a lot of trauma and abandonment by me because I was a young dad that didn't know how to be a dad or how to be in a relationship with anyone, right? And again, that's just part of growing up in my world, right? My mom did her best for me, but she didn't know how to care and love us, right? Or to attune to us as young ones. And so, we never felt loved, or we never felt part of anything. And so we, as a young man, I sought it out there in the world to find, oh, what is love? Oh, wow, oh, this must be love. And it was unhealthy and it was destructive.
Mm.
And so, you do that over and over and over, and you create this cycle of harm in your life, and you go, well, what's life all about if it's kind of pointless, until you go, wow, I've been doing it all wrong.
Mm.
Right? Because of where it was broken, right? Again, we talk about 60 Scoop, residential school, the Indian Act, right? Racism, right? All that played a part in breaking and disrupting that natural law that we had, right? So it's broken. And so we have to come back to it. And so there are a lot of young people coming back to it in a good way, but there are also a lot are still stuck, right? A lot of our communities are still stuck. And a lot of Métis people, I find, are kind of distant. They distance themselves from the ceremonial life because there's, I think the history of Métis people was, we wanted to be separate, but we didn't want to lose our indigeneity, but we kind of got confused, and then the government started to mess with well, if you want to be an Indian or a Métis, you got to be a nation, and we're right. It just confused everything. Whereas you should have just let us organically create what who we were anyway, and we would have probably just been part of our relatives in it, right?
What's the Cree word for Métis people?
Apitogosan.
What does that mean?
It means he is a half son.
Mm.
He says half son, right?
Yeah.
Lots of different.
There's a few names.
There's a few names.
Yeah.
There's a few names, right?
There's a few names.
There's a few names, but he's half son, right? So
half son, totally.
Yeah.
One time I was actually in Alberta with you, and I was sitting down with, one of our adopted family, Emily, and her partner at the time, and he told me one time, he's like this way of life is for everybody. It's a human being. It's a culture. And this really resonated with me because when I'm at work and I'm working in the colonial system, I kind of find that if it's Indigenous, it's like, wow, I can't learn about it, like that's for you over there in that one little section for you.
Right.
And then, but it's like, I mean, we grow up with everybody coming to ceremony, like from all different backgrounds of life, you know what I mean? And it's and that just never really clicked for me.
Yeah, the department lines.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, the Indigenous department.
You're
we
over
have
there.
we have an Indigenous. We have someone Indigenous over here. Call the Indigenous department and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like that's like complete
Opposite.
opposite.
That's a colonial mindset,
like that's
right?
complete And then that's what confuses me so much sometimes when I'm at work and stuff like that.
It's like taking a piece of you and taking it out. So no, sorry, this piece is not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
You can't take piece out of you.
Yeah, but you're you everywhere you go. You that's what I never really understood. So if you're at work and you're you expect me to just be Indigenous at work, you expect over here, but you expect me to be the white token here. Like, what do you want me to be? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just that doesn't ever make sense to me. So it's like, what I'm trying to say is that way of life, that way of looking at the world, it's not good for anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, unfortunately, the way the world is going, it's getting more confusing.
Yeah.
It's getting more confusing, and so I think it's really important that we, as Indigenous people, come back to this way of life, right? Because if we try to participate in that world that's out there right now, we'll lose ourselves even more, because right now the world has gone mad.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not sustainable, and we're going to have to come back and learn that prescription of life and how to take care of ourselves again, and not just in ceremony, but as a community, right? And I think my mom, before she passed, shared a prophecy with me, and I'm not going to share it here, but all I can say is that we need to prepare, right? We need to prepare. And so it's important that, as Indigenous people, we need to support one another and lift each other up. And if that means that we build corporations and companies and whatnot in order to do that, so be it. But the rest of the world isn't going to wait for us. We have to do it. And so it's important that we start being like-minded in that world, in order to protect what we have, so we don't lose it, because they will take this away from us too.
Totally. What do I say all the time? Beat them at their own game.
Beat them at their own game.
That's what I always say. It's like we're the only people. Our worldview is the only way that we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be strong and resistant to colonialism. It kills people.
Yeah.
I think it's like, don't quote me on this for sure, but I know for a fact that if you work in a government job your entire life, you have a high probability of dying 5 years after you retire.
That's why I'm getting out now. I've been in it 18 years, right? Yeah. And again, I'm sort of a unique guy. I'm 60 years old, but I have the mindset is that, I'm not going to let age define me. I'm going to take care of this body, and my mind's going to have to follow along. And so I still work out. I still eat right. I do whatever it takes to be healthy, right? I don't eat garbage. I like bannock, but I don't eat it because it's not traditional. So it was just cheap.
Let's bounce that back. Where did you learn to take care of your physical fitness?
Yeah, I started with Métis, right? And that's where I got. I grew up into hockey and sports and playing football in the winter and ball hockey on the street. But martial arts, that's where, and what I loved about martial art was it's not really a team sport per se. It's an individual sport, and so you have to push yourself, right? You have to discipline yourself, and so my exercise, like I have guys, my peers want, let's go work out. And I went, I don't want to work out with you. Well, why not? Because you'll slow me down, right? I'm going in there to work out, right? I'm not going in there to be social, right? I'm going in there because I'm taking this serious. I'm going to push weight. I'm going to do whatever it takes to sweat and be healthy. I'm not going there, and like go sit around and talk about what we did at work. That's this way. Let's go have coffee after. We'll do that.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. I push myself, right?
Yeah.
And I'm getting older, and it takes a bit longer for me to bounce back and recover, right? But I still push myself. Like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to be that 80-something, 90-something year old guy in the gym, just still going, because that's how I see myself, right? I'm not giving up. Sure, I got arthritis and I'm slowing down, but I'm still going to do it.
The way I see it is like,
because I'm not dead yet.
No.
I'll wait. There's time for that.
I'm still waiting for that house, to be honest with you.
I'm waiting for you to win the big one, man.
Well, even just to stay on that topic, like, I think that people view working out as a chore, and I really do not.
It's not a chore.
It's such a gift. For me, it's like, oh, taking care of that physical part of my realm. Nothing makes you feel more human.
Well, it's such a high.
Yeah, totally.
Right. It gets me so high. And, I've suffered from anxiety and depression most of my life.
Totally.
Right. And to go into and just get those endorphins and that blood running, it's like, what a high, man.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's, there's no better feeling.
The other thing that martial arts taught me in particular, I got this teaching right when I was like 7 years old at Sundance, but it was just about humility. And that's what martial arts really solidified for me.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't shit, boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a girl out there that can kick your ass. Yeah. Like terribly. And it has, and it happens to me all the time. But it's really not about that, really. Like what to me is addicting about martial arts is that you gain every single time you're 1% better. It's like, holy shit, that actually works. You know what I mean? Or even working out in general.
But that teaching of humility, a lot of people don't understand what that teaching really means, right? When you think about humility, to be humble, what does it mean to be humble, right? Well, to be humble means that you have a respect for all those that are around you, right? And that you don't impose your will or your way onto those others, but yet more. So it's much more than that. It's about acceptance, right? Learning to accept yourself, right? For all the flaws and the good things, but also is that acceptance is that others are also like you. They have flaws and they have good points about who they are as a human being, but that acceptance is one of the most important aspects of humility. And how many of us can truly accept somebody for who they are without judging, right? And we're judging animals, right? So we are always looking for meaning. And so being able to filter that judgment out of the meaning part of it, because we need to have meaning. Why am I here? Why am I doing these things? But to filter that judgment out and replace it with that acceptance. And that's really how I look at humility, is that teaching humility is much more than just being humble about where you are, but that level of respect for all life and that acceptance for all of life. And that's true humility.
True. And
right?
If you want to, for me, nothing can put me more in a negative headspace than when I'm judging myself or others.
Yeah.
For me, that's the curse. Like, that's the other thing. You go to jiu-jitsu, you get your ass kicked, and what are you going to sit there and just judge yourself? Like,
look at you shouldn't have hit me too hard.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, it's almost like a gift.
Yeah.
Every single time that you're like, it's always an opportunity to learn something new.
Yeah, I used to have friends of mine. They said, "Oh, can you kick me? You're not supposed to kick me." I said, "Well, block it."
Figure it out, man. Oh, that's funny. Talk about your addiction a little bit, Dad, and then we'll keep going. We literally can go forever, you and I.
So I mean, again, I grew up. It was so normalized growing up. Everyone around me growing up drank, partied, fighting, and some of my earliest memories were all about substance abuse. I mean, there was always parties going on at my mom's place, particularly on the weekends. She did work. She'd go to work, but on the weekends there was always parties. There was always something going on. And then when my older brothers and sisters aged out of foster care, they started coming back home, and it got worse. It got a lot worse. We started seeing other types of drugs in the home, and it was a bad time for us young kids like me, Annie, Mary, and me, right? Because they had been abused quite badly in foster care, and so they took that abuse out on us, right? And so that's where we kind of like, we're out of here, right? We kind of checked out, and if we didn't have to be home, we weren't home, right? Hanging out with friends and whatnot. So yeah, it was. So by the time I was 13, I was already drinking and well, smoking pot and whatnot, right? By the time I was 16, I was doing acid mushrooms and and gratefully, drinking was always there, right? Drinking was always there, but gratefully, I never got into any hard drugs. I think because of my being in martial arts and having that respect for my skill that I had an expectation on myself, not. But I wanted. All my buddies did coke, and they were doing all this stuff, and I remember seeing my buddies in the bar, and they're all doing drugs. And hey, give me some. And I remember my older friends said, "Get the fuck out of here! Don't you ever touch this shit!" And chased me out. What kind of friend are you, man? Chased me away. You guys are having a good time, and you chased me away. But I thank him because if I know my personality, if I would have did that drug, I would have liked it, and I probably would never have been able to get off of it. So he did me a favor, and I always send a little prayer to my buddy Ronnie, right? So thank you, Ronnie, for doing that for me. If you're still around, but yeah, he saved my life, I think. So I never really got into any heavy stuff. But my drinking was bad enough, and I mean, I struggled. It created so much relationship issues, problems with the law, right? Lost jobs, right? It just health, but I couldn't break it. It was almost like it was like a little demon that was just attached to me, but it wouldn't let me go. And I don't know. I remember it must have been 1990-ish. I had left Manitoba and was going to go live in Vancouver, but again, I messed something up over there, and I came back to Manitoba, and I remember it was, I don't know, 2:30 in the morning, whatever it was, and I remember it was beautiful, just nice snowflakes. It was around January, snowflakes just falling, beautiful, just beautiful. And I went look, and I was so wasted, and I just remember looking and said, "Please, God, help me." Right? I was tired. I was it, right? And I remember then I said, "Well, I got to get out of Manitoba." Manitoba, like everyone enabled me. "Oh, Kanja, if you got a drinking problem, just don't drink so much, right? Oh, you don't have a problem. You just quit being an asshole, right?" And that's the kind of things they used to tell me, right? So just don't drink so much. And I couldn't. As soon as I had one, that was it, man. That was it. I'm gone, and you wouldn't see me for days, maybe weeks, right? So it wasn't. I hit it pretty good, but I think most of my family knew how bad I was because I would never get invited to Christmas parties and shit like that, right? They didn't want me around, right?
Yeah.
So I remember I said, "I'm going to get the hell out of this province," and so I went back to Vancouver. And when I got back there that time, I kept partying. It was like I took my suitcases with me and just kept doing it. But I had done some treatment in the past, so I had that little seed in the back of my mind. I said, maybe I need to do treatment again or go to AA or something. So I started going to AA, and I meet some people and start doing the old fellowship thing, and and I did that for a number of years. I get 6 months clean, slip on the weekend, get back on, go for another year, slip, right? So I did that for a long time, doing it like that, right? But because there was always something missing. Like I could AA and all that fellowship stuff was good. It helped, but it wasn't enough for me, right? And I remember somebody introduced me to a sweat lodge. You say, "You ever do a sweat?" No, never, right? I never grew up with that, right? That wasn't part of our world growing up. So I went, no, I don't know what that is. So they invited me. I remember it was out in Surrey, South Surrey, and I went, and it was strange. I felt strange. Do I really belong here, right? All those self-doubting. And I remember when I went in, and when I just remember I went in and it was done. And I went, that's it. I found what I was looking for. And I just got hungry for culture. And so eventually I ended up in Mission, BC, met some elders. We started the Métis local. And that's when really things started to change for me. Yeah. And I was starting to get some really serious clean time. But for me, I had to do a grieving ceremony eventually for my addiction, because you got to think about your addiction is like you have this best friend who's been with you through thick and thin, and he was always there for you, always there for you, right? He's, don't worry, Ken. Those are all ups. Well, I'll look after you, right? Well, and so I said, you know what? I'm sorry, bro. I'm going to have to let you go. I did a grievance ceremony for it. So I had to, let that go. He says, no, you're no good for me anymore. I have to, you have to let you go. So I grieved it. I did a grievance ceremony. And as soon as I put those offerings in that sacred fire, it was like, oh, I felt light. And, I never, ever thought about it again. Even when I went through cancer and my divorce and all these life events that were so difficult, never once did I ever think it'd be nice to have one. Never, ever. I said, no, I'm done. It's done. What replaced it was that. That I always had culture, right? Those medicines were always around, right? I had elders that I could go and talk to, right? There was always some ceremony going on I can go to. And that's what I did.
So in your opinion, how can community, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, do better to support people who are struggling with addiction?
To support it? Well,
because I feel...
I think society in general is so mixed on what addictions, substance abuse need. They're differing opinions, but I think if they treated all those people as human beings and not those people that drink, like, listen to the language that you use. If you listen to the language, then you know what side of the equation that they sit on, whether they support somebody getting healthy or they support somebody to push them away so they're not in my backyard, right? So listen to that. But I think we gotta be less judgmental, and we have to treat these people that are struggling with addiction as a health issue, because this is a health issue. Because if any sane person in their right mind don't want to live on the streets, they don't want to drink their life away. Nobody does that. Because I remember what it was like sitting there thinking, oh, I just want to die. Right? Because I didn't like it. I hated it. But I couldn't stop it because I didn't know how. Right? And everybody that, oh, Ken, you can do it. But there was a lot of people that didn't support me either. Right? So, we have to have a level of compassion. I don't think we have enough compassion, right? I think we're quite we're quite distant in our empathy for those people who are struggling, because they're just they're substance abuse, but they got pockets and a lifetime of trauma, not just the traumas that they experienced, but that they experienced through the generations before them, because trauma is carried genetically through, right? Epigenetics has proven that, right? And so, we have to break that cycle. So it's not going to happen overnight, but if we keep trying to pass the dollar off to somebody else's, right? We have a treatment or a shelter in Wetaskiwin, and people want to close it down. I said, well, where are you going to send them? Oh, send them back to wherever they came from. Well, you're in their home.
Yeah.
They're from here.
Yeah.
right? No, they can go to the reserve. Well, they're not all from the reserve, right? So come on, give your heads a shake. Have some compassion. These people are sick, right? Yeah, you don't want the crime around. Well, those people, that crime that's sitting around those vulnerable people are taking advantage of those vulnerable people. We'll deal with the crime. Yeah, there's a lot of gun problems and a lot of gang issues. Yeah, but they're there because of the system that we live in. It was created by them. They don't take responsibility for that, right? They created it. It's part of the same privilege that we live, right? And again, if you don't have, you're a have-not, and then so where are you going to be, right? Not many of us, and I'm a privileged guy, right? I worked hard. And I'm 2 paychecks away from being homeless, right? Think about somebody who's not makes half of what I make, and their struggle, right? But there's this expectation is that we have to pay a rent or a mortgage. We have to pay hydro and gas, and we have to have insurance. We have to have a car. That expectation it's just like a serpent that eats its own tail, right? It's not sustainable, right? There is a cure for it, but the system doesn't want it, right? I mean, we all participate in it, right? It's not like we have a choice. I mean, do we really have a choice? So you have a choice. You don't have to drive a car. You don't have to do anything. Yeah, right. So I'll be in the shelter then.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in the shelter, so where can I go when you don't want me there?
Yeah.
So give your head a shake.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as simple. So we hide behind our bias, right? And sometimes if there's a policy that wraps, right, if we're working in an organization, we hide behind policy. So our prejudice and our biases will hide behind those policies. Oh, this is just policy. Meanwhile, you're pushing your bias and acting like it's a policy, right? It's bullshit.
Bullshit.
It's bullshit.
Bullshit.
But I mean, we can see through it. People on the streets can see through it. The hypocrisy of it. I'm sorry. I don't want to be all political, but I will take food and I'll go down to the shelter and say, hey, my relatives, come here. Here, have some food. Here's some smokes.
Yeah.
Right? I know what it's like. I know guys are struggling.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, here's $20. You're still a human being. I love you. Right? I know what it's like to struggle and not have a place to live. Right? They can't go home because there's no home. There's no housing for our people. Right? There's no housing even in urban centers for people. They're going, well, we have a tent problem. Give them house. Oh, no, well, we got affordable housing. Affordable to whom?
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't play stupid with. I know affordable housing means market rates. Doesn't mean that somebody on $50,000 can pay, right? With a family of 3.
Yeah.
Right? That's, what's affordable then? Right? So that's the hypocrisy of this whole, right? They hide behind their language. They hide behind their policy because they don't really, really want to change the problem. Because they make their survival, and I'm talking about those ones who work in policy, their survival is based upon.
Yeah, if you solve the problem, where do you go?
Yeah. Then you become redundant.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to work myself out of a job.
Oh, me too. It'd be great.
Right? If there was no more Indigenous people going to jail, I wouldn't have a job because I'd go and do something else.
Yeah.
Right? But as long as there's Indigenous people there, I'm there. I go.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure. Yeah, sure. I get paid well for what I do, but I don't like the environment. The environment is toxic.
Yeah.
It just eats your soul because it never gets any better. And they ask, well, what can we do to make it better? Change the system.
Yeah.
Right? Don't send them to jail.
Yeah.
Like, why sending these guys to jail? Because they're doing crime in order to survive. Right? It doesn't work. It's just you're just adding more problems and more problems, thinking you're going to change that system. It's not designed. It's not designed to work. It's designed to create. It's based on capitalist consumerism, right? We have to make money. It's all about making money, right? It's not about helping one another, right? Because the whole idea about making money is really about feeding back into that system, right? Because if we just pulled out of the system and went back to the land and grew our own food and traded amongst ourselves,
they'd be like, no,
they would no, you got to be in residential school.
Yeah. No, don't do it.
No. It's like, no, you're doing it all wrong. You got to be, no.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you can't even go anywhere. I mean, really, we don't own anything.
Yeah.
I so-called own a house, but do I really?
Yeah.
I'm leasing it.
Yeah, totally. That's the other thing is like, well,
and our house is on reserve. Do we really own this house?
We don't.
No.
We definitely don't.
No. We don't own this.
Yeah.
They can take this away from us too, just like anything else.
Exactly.
So people say, oh, well, those Indians, they got everything. No, we do not.
Yeah.
In
fact, they literally just knocked a house down.
I know.
Like, literally just knocked a house down last week.
Yeah.
I'm sure that guy didn't want his house knocked down.
No. Yeah. But again, if you're not from the right side of the tracks, then you're a problem.
Totally.
And a lot of our people that struggle with addictions are on the wrong side of the tracks, and they're the problem, right? And I'm tired of sometimes I'm just I get overwhelmed and I get frustrated and tired of having to say the same things over and over and over and over to these well-meaning people, but they're just like, didn't we have a conversation and talked about this last week, and now you're saying the same things again today? Like, did you reflect on anything we talked about, right? Or did you just check out and this is my default, right? It's my default judgment, and I go back there all the time. It's like, grow. You have to grow.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
And I'm not. If I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. Right. I'll change my perspective then. But prove me that I'm wrong from my opinions.
Here's one thing we know for sure is that this isn't working.
No.
That's what we know for sure. Might as well try something different.
Yeah.
But that's why I always think about, like, I reflect on money a lot. Like, me personally, Dad, I'm rich already. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I got clothes. I can go to the store. I bought bison. I can eat it. Mm-hmm. I can go hunting. I can do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. I'm rich already. I really just want to make this, like, money through here so I can just give it all away.
True. Yeah, but how much of that comfort that you have is truly sustainable?
Take it all away. I'll move in with you. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
I'm gonna have to change my address. No, I agree though. I've always had a dream that if I could have a lot of money, that I would build a cultural center or something to help, right? I know I have a lot of family, adopted family, because Saddlebacks from Musqueam adopted me. Mm-hmm. Lauren Saddleback adopted me back in 2019, I believe. 2000, yeah. He came and adopted me as part of the family, and so I always said if I had the money, I would build a youth or a school that our language would stay, but also to help out and build long-term recovery, long-term, not these 28-day things. They're long-term.
Yeah,
and look at developing programs for the whole family to deal with that intergenerational impacts and to work with them and substance abuse, obviously detox. I mean, there's some the substances that are on the street now are so toxic that they're they're creating so much health problems, for long-term health problems for people, right? And we have to break that cycle fast, because if our young people continue going down that road, we're going to have a couple of generations of long-term care in our communities, and I don't know if we have the capacity to do that.
I don't think we do. We'll get it done, Dad. Don't you
hope so.
worry. We'll get it done. I was just talking with a future guest on the pod, and he's a language keeper. And I just happened to have read this book that was about learning stuff real fast. And, you know, if you want to go learn French, you move to France, or you move to Quebec and you sit there and you learn it all up. And then you can speak French. If you move somewhere and you can't speak anything else, boom.
You'll learn choice, it. Yeah.
Where do we go here?
Well,
hold on. There's only you can go back to the place, but can you go back there and can you pay for every single class and can you attend every single class and then have a family on top of that? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's prioritizing those things that are important to you, right? Again, at my age, I'm 60. You know, I want to go back to school and do it, but I'm also I'm not ready to give up on some of the other things I like doing, right? Like working out. I mean, I can build around, but my time with Yvonne and our little family is important to me too, right? And so, you know, I want to retire and go learn language and learn more of it, and I'm going to start now that I'm moving my job closer to home. I'm going to be working at Piwapskweno, which is a minimum. It's like a healing lodge, and so I'm really grateful to have that opportunity, because I'm going to be closer to the language now, and I have an opportunity where I'm not having to drive for hours to get to a class, right? So I'll be right there. And so I have no excuse, but I always find excuse because I go, oh, well, I want to go to the gym. Oh, my dog needs a walk.
What do you want Indigenous men to know today?
Well, Indigenous men need to be reminded of our original role in that sacred hoop. You know, if this represents that sacred hoop,
we're looking at a log on the table.
So so here in this smudge that's sitting in the middle of that sacred hoop is we call that the home fire. So this sacred hoop represents that home, that esqueo, that woman, she's responsible for that sacred fire, right? And everything, and so everything within that sacred fire is our responsibility to care for. So those women, those children, those old ones are all sitting in that sacred hoop with that home fire. And so all us men are there serving and helping all those ones that are inside that sacred teepee. And we're going to lift them up and protect them and feed them and care for them to ensure that they have everything that they need for the next 7 generations that are yet to come. That's our role, right? We are the spiritual warriors that are going to care for that sacred hoop. And we have to do it in a gentle and in a humble way, right? Where if it's time to protect them, then we will offer up our lives to do that. But at the same time, we don't create harm in so doing so, but we give it, we make it so that everyone in that sacred hoop can live to their fullest potential. And that's our sacred role. And we forgot that. We were told men don't cry, men be tough. And so, we took that to the extreme, and then we try to dominate our life givers and dominate our old ones and dominate those young star beings, right? Children. We started trying to control and dominate that because we lost those original sacred teachings, that prescription that we were originally given. So we need to remind ourselves that that's our responsibility as men, right? That we are here as protectors and to look after that sacred hoop on behalf of all those that sit in that home fire. That's our responsibility.
What does that look like in today's world?
In today's world, if that means get out, go get a job, right? Care for that, making sure that everyone in that home is safe. Everyone, their needs are being provided for, right? You're kind and you're gentle. Discipline doesn't necessarily mean you have to be aggressive or violent. It just means you're going to do it in a kind and gentle way, right? You've never been disciplined, and then look at the man that you grew up to be, right? Because I lived by that teaching.
There's only one time.
Yeah, but that was.
Well,
you deserved it.
Exactly.
I think you got a spank on the bum.
I think the time that I recall is when I came home and I was yelling at Yvonne.
Oh yeah, you were yelling at a life giver.
And then that's the only time I ever really got it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I've never seen him like that. Clearly that's the line. That will never happen again. Boom.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. You never yell at a life giver.
Yeah, exactly. So then that's like one of those times. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've had those experiences not only with you but with the other boys too.
Yeah.
And they were getting aggressive with their mom, and nope, you do not raise a hand. You do not raise your voice to your mom, your life giver. And that's the teaching that I like. You can do anything else to me or anyone, but that's the line. You do not cross that line.
Yeah.
That line, we're protectors, right? You may not like what your mom or any of those women in your life do, but it doesn't matter, because if they've given their heart to you, right? If they've given your heart to you, then you have a sacred responsibility to care for that heart, right? And if you do not want to be there, then leave.
Yeah.
Right? Because she can also move your stuff out of the DP too, right?
Yeah.
And if she does, you gotta go.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to remind ourselves about what those sacred responsibilities are, and we kind of got caught. It's enmeshed in the colonial way of living, and we're told this is how we're supposed to live. It's not. As men, we don't own nothing.
Yeah.
Women own it all.
Yeah.
Right? Women carry everything.
Yeah.
Right? Women don't even need these medicines, because they already carry their own medicines, their own purity. They purify every month, right? And so we as men, we don't have that ability to purify ourselves. And so we have to go. That's why we do the lodge, the sweat lodge, because that's the only way we're going to be able to purify ourselves, to get back to that sacred connection. Women do it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And then once they get to a certain age and their menstrual cycle stops, then they move into the next phase, and then they can come and join the men in that sacred sweat lodge. See, women weren't allowed to sweat years and years ago, right? Because they had their own lodge, and they had their own ceremonies that they did. They carried all the ceremonies that we as men hold. That was theirs to begin with. But we performed them on behalf of them, because they are always in ceremony. So we had to do that, right? Right? So there's a lot of things that, once you start getting back in culture, that you'll go, oh, it makes sense why our people did it that way, right?
Yeah.
But again, we have to tease out that colonial system too, because there's, again, a lot of our ceremonies went underground and hid from the purview of white, right? And so, I was listening to Tom McCallum, our Sundance maker and friend. He was sharing at the U of A. I was doing a talk there last week, and he said, Métis, don't sweat, and most people believe that, but no, it was never true, right? Métis people sweat. They just never shared that they did, because there are a lot of them during the dark times of our people. They would go to church, and then they would go into the bush and sweat after, right? To hide it from the priest, right? And so a lot of our ceremonies went underground. That's why a lot of our young people were never included, because they're so innocent, right? If
So
we would have,
honest.
So if we would have brought them to these ceremonies that we weren't allowed to do, and if the Indian agent or the priest came up, hey, where's your parents? Oh, they're in the bush having a ceremony. We would have been in trouble, right?
Yeah.
We would have gone to jail for doing that back in the day, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we, unfortunately, many of our people kept the kids out of those ceremonies.
Mm.
And so like we never grew up with it,
Mm.
right? So growing up was foreign to us.
But doesn't it just fill your heart when you see a kid at a ceremony?
Oh,
today?
yeah, it's right now, yeah.
It's, like,
So,
amazing.
that was one of the things that I said, I'm going to break that cycle.
Yeah.
We have to bring our kids back. We have to make them feel like they're included. Because you were the little chief there for the longest time at our Sundance, right? And so allowing the kids to play an active role in those ceremonies was important. That we recognize the hurt and the damage that us adults did to our young people, not including them. And so that by having that one little ceremony where the kids can do all the doctoring for all the old people, that was so important, that you were wanted, you were included, right? And so you did that, and you passed your fans on to others, and it still goes on. Right? So I know that Tom's still doing it. He's getting old, and he definitely wants us to come back. And he said, come and sing for us. So we'll have to go and do some singing.
Oh, I'll come back.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go back.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up here in a few, Dad. A few last questions. What do you want my generation and younger to think about today?
What do I want your generation? Well, I think the most important is that is don't forget where you come from. I was thinking yesterday. Sometime, I can't anyway. And I thought, what if our young people keep marrying outside of our culture? Will we have a culture left? Right? It's beyond my understanding. I don't know. Some argue yes because it's all about culture. Some will say no because, blood quantum. Right? I don't know what it is, but it worries me. My mom's generation, they always married back into the community, and it wasn't until my generation that we started to marry outside of it, right? And it's happening quite a bit, right? And but with that in mind, I would say is that don't forget about that home fire. Come back to it. Nurture that home fire. Learn about those sacred laws. Learn about, if you can pick up a few words of the language, start using it in everyday life, right? Use those medicines. Don't forget about, because that's the important part. What is those natural laws? And they're all tied to these little ceremonies, these little practices that we do, and that in that web of life, and that remember that everything that we say will reverberate for the next 7 generations. So we have to be impeccable with the words that we use too, right? Because whatever we say can create harm. So I have to be mindful of that, right? So if for that, I would say is that, go off and experience the world, but don't forget you can always come home, right? Your home is always here.
Who would you like to dedicate this podcast to?
I think I'm going to dedicate this one to Donna. I love you, and I'm so happy that you're back in our family. And this one's for you.
Let's go.
Hi,
Thanks,
hi.
Dad. We'll do it again. Hi.
Hi, Nanaskaman.
I love you, Dad.
I love you too, my boy.
I'll see you soon.
Hi.
Hi, my relatives. Thank you so much for watching today's podcast with Piwapskweno, my father, Ken Drury. I know that I had a lot of fun recording it, so I really hope that you have a lot of fun listening to it as well. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe, like, and comment on the video on our YouTube channel. It means a lot. You can also leave a review on Spotify as well, too. It really helps out. I want this podcast to be your new favorite Sunday lounging activity where you just turn it on, you watch the whole thing through, you make yourself a cup of tea, and you get comfortable. If you have any feedback on the podcast, please comment on YouTube or send us some feedback through Spotify as well, too. There should be a prompt when you're watching it on your phone. If you have any guest recommendations in the Greater Vancouver area, please DM us on one of our socials, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. all under the handle Our Storytellers. Keenan Askaman, I'm grateful for every single one of you. Love, Riel, all my relations.